Arlo Guthrie recently came to Kankakee, Illinois. You know, the town he mentioned when he sang about the City of New Orleans train. It was part of a benefit tour supporting musicians in New Orleans. For those not familiar with Kankakee, it does have a few minor claims to fame. Dairy Queen, the soft-serve ice cream franchise, it got its start here. So did Fred McMurray. He was born in Kankakee, but didn't hang around long. In fact, leaving Kankakee is kind of a sad theme in this city of nearly 30,000, about 50 miles south of Chicago. More than 20 years ago, many of the major factories left town, and these days, many of the brightest young people are lured away to flashier destinations. David Letterman even helped cement Kankakee's PR problem when he suggested a new tourism slogan, "Come for the unemployment, stay for the crime." Still, the act of leaving Kankakee was made so lyrical when Guthrie sang the words, "On my southbound odyssey, the train pulls out of Kankakee." They were written by the late Chicago songwriter Steve Goodman about his trip down the rail line. Guthrie's voice carried the somewhat depressing sentiments around the world. It was no minor event then recently when Arlo, with family and friends, came to Kankakee. It was part of the Ride in the City of New Orleans tour to put guitars, mics, and other instruments and equipment back in the hands of struggling musicians in hurricane-ravaged areas. The tour started in Chicago and followed the City of New Orleans line. Kankakee's finest auditorium was only half filled. As I looked over the empty seats, I worried concert organizers might see the stop in Kankakee as a mistake. Surely word would get out in music circles that any future stop in Kankakee, well, it should be avoided. But that bit of damage to the city's reputation wasn't going to hurt much. Acts rarely find their way here anyway. So Arlo's visit made front-page news in the local paper. The crowd was calm until the concert's end. Everyone knew what was coming, the City of New Orleans and the reference to our hometown. This is where I became conflicted. How do I react when Arlo sings Kankakee? He puts more can in Kankakee than most people who live here do. Now, some people might be inclined to give out a cheer at that moment, perhaps a hoot or a whistle. Some fans might even consider combining their hoot or whistle with an ecstatic overhead clap, with a follow-up, Kankakee, woohoo, woohoo. As the song began, I remained undecided. My spontaneous response might actually be just that. But eventually, I figured the most appropriate thing to do would be to do nothing. I didn't want the musicians, I didn't want them to think that the only thing that we appreciated all evening was the delivery of those 3 syllables. When the train, 3 conductors, and 25 sacks of mail musically pulled out of Kankakee, I just stood there and smiled, while others vocalized their appreciation. I was glad they did, and I started to wish that I would have let myself get caught up in the moment. See, some cities make it into songs all the time, but Frank Sinatra never serenaded Kankakee the way he did New York or Chicago. Randy Newman obviously loves L.A., but has no emotion for Kankakee, and it's hard to imagine Will Smith's Miami party anthem with a chorus about the virtues of a blue-collar Illinois town. So I guess what put the smile on my face, the goosebumps on my arms, was just the idea that this was sort of our song, a song for all of us who have hung around this town. And while the auditorium wasn't full, there were hundreds of people there from my modest hometown who were willing to send their support and dollars down the rails to New Orleans, even if we were only connected to the people there in a superficial way, train tracks and a song. It felt very real that night, the idea that Kankakee was helping to bring music back to New Orleans, even in a small way. In fact, I think it continues to feel good weeks after Arlo's train pulled out and rolled along past houses, farms, and fields. Those were houses that some of my ancestors built, where people in my family raised families. And fields, those were acres my grandfather and great-grandfather farmed years ago. The train passes graveyards of rusted automobiles. Some of those might have been cars and trucks that we once drove. And friends of mine still scavenge through those hulks for parts and cars that they'll bring back to life on the fairgrounds dirt track. And you can see that from the train, too. No, it sure isn't Sweet Home Chicago or even Walking in Memphis. But that one line means something special to us. The night after the auditorium concert, some of the Guthrie family and friends played at a Kankakee bar, literally feet from the tracks. Of course, they closed the show with Arlo's hit. I wasn't conflicted the second time. I sang at a level some critics might consider more like shouting or even screaming. That, again, the train pulls out of Kankakee. And toward the end of the song, I think I turned the volume up one more notch over the raucous barroom voices and delivered the line, "Good night, America, how are ya?" And I took a moment and answered the question to myself. Well, I'm not sure about all of America, but on this night in Kankakee, Illinois, we're feeling good.